Hi and welcome to another episode of Cheesy Bites. Today we're looking at the Modern97 from MelGeek. This isn't my first board from them. I actually bought the Mojo 68 on Kickstarter back in 2021, which I really enjoyed, but ended up selling it to a friend of mine as my keyboard hoarding started to get a little out of hand. I never opened that one up, but I always thought that it was built very solidly, and among the many pre-builds I had the chance to try out, it always remained in the back of my mind as one that I wish I took a more detailed look at. This is why I'm very happy that I get to check out this one. Now, this time around they did send me one, but as is always the case, I'm not being paid, they didn't see a preview of this, and all the ramblings coming out of my mouth are of my own. On the surface we have, well, a 97% keyboard in a compressed layout. This means the number cluster is moved closer to the left, giving you just a tad bit more space on your desk, while still giving you every bit of control if you need it. If you're wondering which 3% are missing, it's the dedicated delete key, page up, down, home, and the end key, which can easily be accessed via the second layer on the numbers cluster over here. The color you see here is called Ocean. There's also a darker version named Fountain. It's an interesting look for sure, especially the outer top shell, which is made of plastic and reminds me of those recycled materials you see every now and then. I wish it was, because it would have made it really cool, but it's a nice look nonetheless, and one that I quite like. I'm also wondering whether or not the splatters are unique on every board or the same, but that's just a pointless thought. On the bottom we have a semi-transparent housing with a visible second layer shell in blue that is embossed with rows of characters that a certain billionaire would love to copyright into oblivion. We also have three symbols representing a face, love, and of course gaming, or maybe it's the love of gaming, which I very much approve of. Then there is this final element here that shares the same pattern as seen on the top housing, but in the keycap matching brown color. Speaking of those, and flipping the board back around, these are MelGeek's own MCR profile double shot PBT caps. They are basically a slightly taller cherry version with a larger concave and more rounded corners. They're pretty nice and give the board a slightly vintagey feel. I always loved SA caps, but I think it takes a certain board design to be able to pull that look off. This doesn't go as far as SA or MT3, but the more moderate approach matches the rest of the keyboard's design. What I didn't like so much, but is very subjective, is the font that was used for the caps. I'm just not a big fan of these tall-looking, sporty or military-like letters. For what it's worth, they are crisp and level across the board, and the brown from the caps matches the one from the back perfectly, which isn't a given, and even the MelGeek logo-infused escape key is double shot too, which gives everything a very consistent and overall well-made look and feel. If we take a look at the behind, we also find a single left-handed USB-C port for charging or wired operation, and next to it, the switch to choose between those modes, which I find is a little mushy and unsatisfying to use. It's a small detail and it's unlikely you'll be constantly switching modes, so it shouldn't be of any concern. Speaking of small details, I'm known to nitpick here and there, and on this board too there is one thing that is completely negligible, but I thought it was funny, so I'm gonna mention it anyway. Like on most products, you get these stickers to identify them, and the one used here is a bit thicker and tougher, so much so that it keeps popping up by itself. What I mean is that the back of this board has this nice curve, but the sticker doesn't really want to adapt to it. Of course, you can just push it down, but it keeps getting up again and again, and will eventually fall off at some point. Now, for somebody like me who whenever I can will remove those things anyway, it's a great feature. Maybe it was even intentional, especially made for people like me. You know, like those Mission Impossible messages that disintegrate themselves after a certain amount of time. Now, functionality-wise, we are looking at pretty common things. We have the mentioned wireless operation, although one very impressive aspect of it is that you can pair the Modern with up to 8 devices. Normally you get like 4, so this is a pretty hefty bump. Might be a really useful thing if you have many things to connect to. I don't connect with many things, I usually just stay at home. Anyway, as usual, you can hold down function in one of the numbers to pair to your desired device, whether that be a tablet, phone, or PC Mac. Speaking of PCs and Macs, we of course can change up the OS mode on this board as well, but for some reason there's no indication when you do that. There's one when you change or pair to a device, and normally on boards like these, whenever you change some configuration, one of the LEDs will blink or do something, but on my Modern nothing happens. I just hold down function and ask for around 5 seconds, which will do the trick. It just doesn't communicate that it did something. Other than that, we have the media controls, which can easily be accessed via the function key, as well as the ability to switch between 6 key or N key rollover. If you don't know what that is, it's the amount of keys that can be registered at the same time. N key means that you can technically push down all the keys at once and it will still get all the information. You know, in case your cat walks over the board and you were hoping that she might just accidentally finish that novel you're working on. Why you would want to limit that to 6 is something that I don't know. I'm sure there is a use case somewhere where limiting the rollover might actually be helpful, because normally on pre-builds like this, and key rollover is a listed feature. In general, this and the 8 parable devices make me think that this board has a very office-centric focus that I can't quite place because I'm not too familiar with those environments, but that's just a guess of mine. Furthermore, there is also a software suite, and quite an extensive one I might add, one that might take the crown to be the most fully featured one besides VIA or VIAL, especially on pre-builds. We have full control to remap every key to your liking, including being able to set up to 4 layers, which is really nice. There is also some special functions that can be reassigned, some of which though I couldn't decipher, like with most of these software suites, they aren't fully translated. But that doesn't mean we can't use most of their features, such as more fine granular RGB controls where you can modify any of the 7 available profiles. There's also something called shortcuts, which lets you create one-level key combos from a predefined list of functions, just like the ones the board ships with. In fact, those are here too and can even be deleted. Pretty interesting, I must say. This is a level of flexibility that I haven't seen before. Lastly, we also have macro recording and assignment, where you can create up to 8 macros and then later use the mapper to assign them to any of the available keys. Then there is this settings page, which gives you a surprising amount of information. For example, you can check the temperature to see if your board has a cold, the current battery cycle and health data, which is again pretty impressive. You can also configure the sleep time depending on which mode you are on, and even change the Bluetooth name of the board itself. Again, really nice. I mean, hardly anyone is going to tinker with these, but the fact that you can actually do this is pretty cool. I like it. Even more useful is that you can switch the polling rate to 1000 MHz on the wired and 2.4 GHz modes for a faster, more immediate response. It is definitely something that the more competitive gamers among you will appreciate, and again, something I've never seen before, at least the configuration part of it. A 1000 Hz polling rate isn't that uncommon. I wish you could change this without having to install the software though, but it's really nice to be able to do so nonetheless. I'm not a competitive gamer or skillful enough to be able to give you any real data on how much that impacts actual gaming performance. Having it activated and feeling that it is more responsive might just be something that my brain made up because it thinks it's more responsive, so you'll have to take MelGeek's words for it. Alright, that pretty much sums up all the functionality. Let's take it apart and see how this thing is put together. I was dreading this a little bit because from the outside it looks like everything is clamped together, and unfortunately that is actually the case. I first took a peek underneath the rubber feet, as those sometimes hide the screws, but sadly no luck, and even worse, the glue used for those disintegrated itself pretty quickly, so don't play around here if you don't have to, otherwise they might not stick back. I then decided to take off the caps. Sometimes, like on the new boards, the screws are on the plate, but again no luck. Even after removing all the switches, I couldn't spot any screws. It was then that I realized that the board is indeed entirely held together by plastic clamps. But a bit of forced push on one of the corners and the use of my handy iFixit pick, I managed to jam a little gap in between the top and bottom frame and finally was able to separate the 2 pieces. Interesting construction for sure, not one of my favorites though. It's a bit too much pressure if you ask me. But as is with most pre-builds, they are not necessarily made to be opened up anyway. I like to do it to see if it can be modded, easily repaired, or just out of plain curiosity. But here for the first time we got a clear indication that we are not welcome inside, because we got one of those warranty seal stickers that will leave a mark when torn. Moving our attention to the bottom half, we got 2 layers of case foam and an interesting honeycomb-shaped underside. We can spot the daughter board along with the ribbon cable that is additionally secured by some fabric tape, and the large 4000 mAh glued-in battery. The bottom piece is also made of multiple elements, but I didn't dare to separate any more parts. There was no need to, as the construction is entirely cosmetic. Much more interesting is the plate. Apart from containing a layer of PCB and plate foam, we got what I assume is a palm plate with plate mounted stabs that are factory looped to a decent amount. We also have these very interesting custom silicone gaskets. They slide in on the side of the plate and have little standoffs that slot right into the bottom piece. A really interesting design if you ask me, and probably the most extensive gasket system I've seen on a plastic pre-built to date. But it doesn't stop here. Looking at the PCB, we got some nice flex cuts which give the board a really cushy feel even with all the foam layers present. I really got to give credit where it's due. Even though I don't like the way it is put together, the units are pretty impressive and were a big surprise to me. This results in an overall very comfortable typing experience at the fixed 7.5-degree typing angle, but even with all this flex, the board never felt as bouncy as it would seem to be. It's kind of a weird mix. It appears to have all the right ingredients but doesn't quite feel right in the end. Definitely not for a lack of trying though. The switches mine came with are the custom designed Sonic 53 from Kale and feel fantastic out of the box. So where does this lead us with the Modern 97? It seems to check all the right boxes, besides the pressure-fitted construction of course, but somehow just never really tickled my senses above average. Mind you, this is quite a subjective take on it. Some people will love the design, some not so much. I'm a bit torn with the color choices and the included cap design, but if you dig this, it's a very capable board with some special software configuration I haven't seen before. I believe MelGeek certainly took their time with this to build something with unique elements and styling, but I also feel that their Mojo series is just a tad bit more interesting. This could be a great productivity board for the office though, a little understated but still with a sprinkle of fun. Literally. You also get some extra functionality and connectivity that might impress the big boss, so much so that you might finally get to the top draft of that promotion you were gunning for. Anyhow, what do you think about the Modern 97? Fit for management or back to school with this one? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thank you so much for watching and see you soon in the next one. Bye bye.